We may always concerned with how healthy our skin looks as our appearance. However, it has many other important functions. Skin is the largest organ in a human body. It forms a boundary between the human body and the external environment. The functions of the integumentary system. For protection, the skin is covering the body and provide a barrier allowing us to interact with the external environment. The structure in the skin layers help to reduce the negative and harmful effects of the ultraviolet light. It also to prevent microorganisms from entering the body and reduces the loss of moisture to prevent dehydration. The skin plays a major role in regulating the body temperature through the modulation of blood flow through the skin, such as the blood vessels dilation and constrictions, and the activity of the sweat glands. For sensation, the integumentary system has sensory receptors which can detect heat and cold, touch, pressure, and pain. When the skin is exposed to the ultraviolet light, the skin will produce a molecule called cholecalciferol that can be transformed into an active form of vitamin D called calcitriol in the kidney. This molecule is an important regulator of calcium homeostasis. For excretion, small amount of waste products can be excreted through the skin and glands. The skin is made up of two main tissue layers, which are the epidermis and dermis, while the skin is resting on the subcutaneous tissue. The epidermis is the superficial layer of the skin, which is the outer or uppermost layer. The epidermis layer consists of stratified squamous epithelial tissue, which is multiple arranged layers of flattened epithelial cells. These multiple cell layers are able to resist abrasion on the skin surface and reduces the loss of moisture through the skin. The epidermis is separated from the underlying dermis by a basement membrane. The epidermis is not as thick as the dermis, and it does not contain any blood vessels. The living cells of the epidermis are able to receive nutrients and excrete waste products by the diffusion of substances between the epidermis and the capillaries of the dermis. The epidermis is made up of several types of cells, such as melanocytes. Melanocytes produce the pigment called melanin, which contributes to skin color. The epidermis is also made up of Langerhans cells. They are dendritic cells and are part of the immune systems. In the epidermis, the Meraki cells are specialized epidermal cells. They are connected with the nerve endings and are responsible for detecting light touch and superficial pressure. Most cells of the epidermis are called keratinocytes, and they produce a protein mixture called keratin. These enable the cells to be more durable. The durability of the cell allows the epidermis to have the ability to resist abrasion and reduce the loss of moisture. The keratinocytes of the epidermis are constantly lost at its surface, but are also constantly replaced by the other cells moving from the deeper layer. The new keratinocytes are produced when the keratinocyte stem cells undergo mitosis in the deeper layer of the epidermis called Stratum Basale. So, as the new cells are formed, the older cells will be pushed to the surface. As the cells move from the deeper epidermal layers to the surface, the shape and the chemical composition of the keratinocytes will be changed through a process called keratinization, where the cells accumulate keratin. During keratinization, the cells will eventually die and produce an outer layer of dead cells that are able to resist abrasion and forms a permeable barrier. Keratinization is a continual process. The developmental stages or transitional stages of the cells can be recognized distinctly as the cells change. In these stages, the many layers of cells in the epidermis are divided into regions, which are also known as strata. The epidermis have 5 strata, ranging from the deepest to the most superficial. Stratum Basale is the deepest region, and followed by Stratum Spinosum, then Stratum Granulosum, and followed by Stratum Lucidum, and the most superficial is Stratum Corneum. Stratum Basale is the deepest region of the epidermis. It is consist of single layer of cuboidal or columnar cells. The epidermis is anchored to the basement membrane, and this membrane is to attach to the dermis. In this region, cells are produced by keratinocytes. By undergoing mitotic division, the cells will be pushed towards the upper region. Stratum Basale consists of melanocytes which produce melanin. Melanin protects the skin against ultraviolet light. Stratum Spinosum is the region above or superior to Stratum Basale. It contains about 8 to 10 layers of cells. In this stratum, the cells are flattened when pushed towards the surface or the upper layers. In this region, keratin fibers and lamellar bodies, which are lipid-filled membrane-bound organelles which involved in keratinization, are formed inside the keratinocytes. Stratum Granulosum is the region lying above Stratum Spinosum in the epidermis. It contains about 2 to 5 layers of flattened diamond-shaped cells. In this region, the cells are flattened and are orientated parallel to the surface of the skin. In the most superficial layer of the Stratum Granulosum, the cells will start to lose their nuclei and cytoplasmic organelles, and eventually the cells degenerate and die off. However, the keratin fibers and keratohyalin granules within the cytoplasm do not degenerate. Keratohyalin granules are produced in this region, which are able to create tight barrier that provide an impermeable layer which protects the body from the evasion by foreign particles. These granules will accumulate in the cytoplasm of the cell. The lamellar bodies, which is formed as the cell passes through the stratum spinosum, they will move to the plasma membrane and release their lipid contents into the extracellular space. They serve to prevent and reduce the loss of moisture. Stratum lucidum is the region above stratum granulosum, and it may appear as a thin transparent layer. It consists of 3 to 5 layers of dead cells. This region usually is only present in thick skin of the palm and soles, and it is absent in most thin skin. In this region, the keratin fibers are present, and the keratohyalin from the stratum granulosum will be dispersed or distributed around the keratin fibers. Therefore, the cells appear somewhat transparent. The last and most superficial region of the epidermis is the stratum corneum. it consists of 25 or more layers of dead overlapping squamous cells, which contains keratin. Squamous cells are thin, flat cells that made up the epidermis, and they provide a barrier to protect the underlying tissues from infection and loss of moisture. In this region, the skin cells are continually shed as the skin is being rubbed against or washed. In Stratum Corneum, the dead cells with a hard protein envelope filled with protein keratin are called cornified cells. Keratin is a mixture of keratin fibers and keratohyalin. The hard protein envelope and the keratin are responsible for the structural strength of the stratum corneum. There are a few types of keratin. The types of keratin found in the skin is soft keratin, whereas another type of keratin which is found in nails are the hard keratin. Cells containing hard keratins are more durable than the cells with soft keratin, and they are not shed, which is why we need to cut our nails when it reaches a certain length. In the stratum corneum, lipids are released from the lamellar bodies and surrounding the skin cells. The lipids are responsible for many of the skin's permeability characteristics, such as preventing or reducing water or moisture loss, and resist abrasion to protect the underlying layers. The tissue layer underlying the epidermis is the dermis. The dermis is resting on the subcutaneous tissues. It is the thickest layer of the skin. Dermis consists of connective tissues, which are made up of protein fibers. It supports and protects the underlying layers of the skin. The dermis house the blood vessels, nerve endings, hair follicles, smooth muscles, glands, and the lymphatic vessels. Dermis provides the elasticity to the skin, a sense of touch, and a temperature sensation. The dermis is composed of two tissue layers, papillary layer being the superficial layer and reticular layer being the deeper layer. The papillary layer is the layer that extends towards the epidermis. It is loose connective tissue with thin fibers that are loosely arranged. In this layer, it contains blood vessels that supplies the overlying epidermis with oxygen and nutrients. And it is also involved in removing waste products and aids in regulating body temperature. The dermal papillae under the thick skin of the palms of the hands and sole of the feet lie in parallel curving ridges, which shape the upper layer, the epidermis, into fingerprints and footprints. The ridges serve to increase friction and improve the grip of the hands and feet. The layer under the papillary layer is the reticular layer, which consists of dense, irregular connective tissue. The reticular layer is the main layer of the dermis. It is lying continuous with the subcutaneous tissue and forms an irregularly arranged fibers which are resistant to stretching and provide strength and elasticity. The orientation of the elastic and collagen fibers produce cleavage lines or tension lines in the skin. It is important for health professionals to understand the cleavage line directions because it is important during a surgery and to fittingly reduce the formation of scar tissues in wounds. In this layer, it consists of blood vessels, nerve endings, hair follicles, and glands, which is sweat glands and sebaceous glands. The subcutaneous tissue is the tissue layer deep to the skin. It is also known as hypodermis. The subcutaneous tissue attaches the skin to underlying bone and muscles and supplies the skin with blood vessels and nerves. The subcutaneous tissue consists of loose connective tissue with collagen and elastic fibers. The cells within the subcutaneous tissue are fibroblasts, adipocytes, and macrophages. About half the body's stored lipids are in the subcutaneous tissue, where they serve as insulator and paddings to the underlying organs. The stored lipids are also a source of energy for the body. These are the basic information of the skin, which is part of the integumentary system. The integumentary system is one of the major organ systems, which it provides structures and protection for the underlying bodies.